You. Do you hate ads interrupting your podcasts? We do too. That's why we're trying to keep ads away from Hot Rods of the Sky. The best way for us to do that is for you to go to merch.hotrodspodcast.com right now and purchase some exclusive Hot Rods of the Sky merchandise. Doesn't matter if you purchase a sticker, a hoodie, or a phone case. Anything you purchase goes directly back into the show and helps us fund this without you having to listen to ads that you don't care about. That link, once again, is merch.hotrodspodcast.com. Thanks so much.
Hello, everyone. This is Kevin.
This is Callum.
And this is Katie, and you are listening to episode 7 of Hot Rods of the Sky. Hi, everybody, and thanks so much for listening. Tonight, we are going to be discussing a little bit more of the GBZ, and we have a very special guest with us, and his name is Delmar Benjamin. Delmar, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good, thanks. Obviously, you are here because you have, correct me if I'm wrong, the most hours in, GBs ever out of anybody. Is that right?
Yes, I believe so. I've got about 1,500 hours in the R2, plus I've flown most of the other GBs.
And you also did the first flight of the GBZ, correct?
I did.
So tonight we are going to take a nice trip down memory lane. Delmar and Dad are going to chat about how they met and why Delmar was a little bit of a catalyst to the GBZ project. And I'm just going to let them go at it. So go ahead, guys.
Well, thanks for coming on tonight with us, or today, Delmar. That's great. I appreciate it. When we saw you fly the R2 at Sun and Fun that first year when you came down, Jeff and I, saw that and we were pretty inspired, but we weren't necessarily inspired to build a GB. We were inspired to build something cool that maybe we would have built or had we been alive in that era, something like that. And we had a couple of ideas of what to do, and guys like Jim Youngkin and others kind of poo-pooed those ideas, and then a GBZ project came available for sale that we bought that was junk, but it kind of got us stuck on the project. And then the following year, when you were back at Sun and Fun, we met again, and I showed you a little bit of the stuff that we were doing, and I think that's when we started discussing in a little bit more detail.
Yes, I remember that.
And it was, I think that was, what was the first year that you were down at Sun and Fun? Was that 91 or 92? 92 probably.
Okay. 92.
And then, so the second trip would have been 93. So it would have had,
yes.
Callan would have been all of like 2 years old at that point. And
almost 2. Yeah.
And no Katie yet at that point. But,
yeah, we can call that the Dark Ages, days without Katie. That's what we'll call it, yeah.
BC?
Yeah, BK before Katie, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, and then we kind of got started into it, and we're lucky to have you and Steve Wolf as friends and guys who blazed the trail in front of us, because you guys had insights that really helped us out a lot as we were going through the project. When you let's just kind of go back and kind of tell us a little bit about how you got to the point of building and flying the R2. Where did that come from?
Well, actually, I was a big fan of the Z model after Turner built that replica. I was pretty jacked up about building one of those since I was a kid. And then when I talking to Steve Wolf about it, because I figured with Steve Wolf's genius, we could get this done. And I'd just seen a few pictures of the R2, one looking down from a balcony, it looks like a football, And I thought that's the coolest thing, but I don't think it'd fly. But Steve suggested that we build the R2 because somebody already built the Z model. Turner had already built the Z model. So, okay, same engine. So that's what we set out to do.
Yeah, pretty awesome.
I remember interviewing all these old guys about the history, and now
That's
we're
right.
the old guys.
well, this whole idea for the podcast kind of came along from dinner one night with some friends, and we were talking. I was telling stories, and he said, "Is anybody writing all this shit down?" And I said, "No." And I said, "But Katie had the idea for a podcast, and we just to talk about some of the projects that we worked on and some of the cool people that we've come to know." And so our friends pretty much encouraged us to go ahead and do it. So that's why we decided to do it, so we can actually record a little bit of this stuff.
Yeah, they were tired of hearing Kevin ramble on
Yeah,
at
there
dinner. And they're just like, have him talking to a microphone.
You want a second opinion.
right. So then you guys finished the R2. When did you start building it? Because you finished it in 91, right?
I started building parts in like the 1990, I think. I started gathering information on my own about 1990,
Okay.
and Steve got involved in 91. We built it during the year of 1991, actually. Started January of 1991 in Steve's shop. And I'd built stuff prior to that, stuff that simple guy could build. But I certainly wasn't capable of building the GB by myself. And when he got involved, and then we had 3 other guys that were involved that were really spectacular. Jim McAllister was a good welder, and he pretty much spent all his time welding up all the parts, a lot of welding in the GB.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had Dwayne Trappin, who was a wood guy, everything, but he was good with the wood. And then Steve had a lot of other projects, but the GB took first place, and so we hammered away at it. It was pretty intense. That's pretty much what I did for a year.
Wow. Yeah, so you guys just dedicated to it full time with the crew of the 5 of you and just banged it out.
Well, actually, Steve had other projects. He had an airplane in there, Jim Franklin's airplane, and a stagger wing Beech. He had a lot of stuff going on, but he just kind of pushed it back. He got excited about the GB. I call it entheos, in a Greek word that comes from enthusiasm, and that's what got the GB built. Was we got enthused about building it, and everybody was fired up that was working on it. That's why it got done in a year. I'm not the kind of guy that could go on building a GB for 12 years. I'd take the parts in the back of the shop and do something that was easier.
Right. So
but it's the genius of Steve Wolf that got that GB built.
Yeah, Steve is a special talent, no doubt. He really is he's a great guy. Which it was good to see you, both of you guys. A couple months ago, I guess it is now, when you guys stopped by for a visit. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, what Steve is doing right now is a pretty good testimony. He's got a friend that flew a P-47. Wow, let's build one of those. And he's flying around behind this round engine, and I thought he was nuts. But then he worked in the RV factory for a little bit, and he knows a lot of guys that built RV, and he gets the plans and scratches some stuff up on paper, and boom, he's got a P-47 in his shop.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
It's really cool. It's really cool.
He's an amazing guy, and he's one of the old guys still.
Yeah, good guy.
Well, and Delmar, you said you spent 1,500 hours in the R2. I can't really imagine spending 1,500 hours doing really anything. What's it like to spend that much time in cockpit of a GB?
Most of the time, you're just sitting in there. and you're freezing to death. Most of the time I was sitting in there freezing to death. Hypoxic because flying over weather.
Yeah.
Well,
but
in the previous... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, in the previous episodes, Dad had mentioned that it was incredibly hot in the Z for why was it? Is just like the engine
No,
was just
it was
kind of,
June,
I
and it
forget
was
why it
the
was.
middle of June in the middle of the afternoon in
Oh, okay.
Florida, and it was 105 degrees sitting in the shade. So it was just miserably hot that day. The weather was hot.
Well,
Yeah,
wasn't
there
there
was no
something
environmental
about the way
system.
that like
There was
the
no
way
environmental system in that GB. If you're sitting for 20 minutes on the end of the runway at Sun and Fun, the thermometer in there is about 140.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
wow.
then if you're flying cross country across the Rockies in Colorado, it's about 16 below in there. So I can't say that was
Oh,
a fun job.
wow.
And a lot of that time that you
yeah, and the
flew, it
GBZs.
was because you were zigzagging back and forth across the entire country, and as well as you shipped it to Europe and flew it overseas too. So there's a lot of time where you were having to transport yourself in the airplane from show to show to show, and that's those times you're talking about there.
Yes, I never climbed in that GB and flew it for fun ever. I was headed to a show.
Yeah.
I was headed someplace to a show to make some money every time I got into it. It wasn't an airplane that you go out and recreate in. I never had the urge to go get in and fly around. Never. It was a job I had to do.
Well, and like with everything you're saying, I can kind of now understand why a lot of the times they'll just cart around the airplanes on like in trailers and stuff like that. You know, you kind of would not want to fly in any of those conditions. Be like, put it on a truck. I'll meet you at the airport.
But in real life, you can't really take the GB apart and get from um, Hillsboro, Oregon um, to New York, in, taking it apart and driving it. You can't make it. So it was kind of a necessity to fly the thing just for time.
Yeah.
We did 20 shows, average 20 shows a year,
Wow.
50 performances usually in a
Wow.
year.
That's a
So
lot.
it's pretty heavy
Yeah.
schedule. Plus, I was farming full time too in Montana.
And
Wow.
So there was times when I would try to fly early in the show, like on Sunday. I try to fly early, so I was 11 o'clock or noon or 1 o'clock, and I'd fly from the East Coast back to Montana. And I remember during harvest one year, I get home and the custom cutters were sitting in my yard. This is at midnight. I flew across the country, drive home, and there's custom cutters sitting full of wheat. Got to unload this wheat. So I had to go clean a grain bin and unload 6 trucks that night after I flew across the United States in a
Wow.
GB. So it wasn't easy.
yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
But that's the the drive, and a good example of how much drive you have as a person and a pilot, performer, everything else. That there's a mission that needs to be done, and you do it, and that's pretty impressive. And then let's talk about the mission of doing the test flights on the Z, that warm summer in Florida that year.
It was hot. It was hot as hell.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and
that was
you were the guy that was crazy enough to get in there.
Yeah, I remember walking into the hangar that morning and it's like going to a funeral. Everybody was walking around and pale, like they're going to watch a disaster. And it was the most exciting flight that I ever did in my life,
Wow.
flying that GBZ. Spectacular airplane.
Yeah, it was one of those things that
The most spectacular airplane that I've ever flown, actually.
wow.
Wow.
That's quite an honor coming from you. Yeah.
High praise.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I can remember that day, and then we have the video that we put up on YouTube now from the flights, and how nervous I was, and pacing around, wearing a hole in the concrete, walking around in circles, but I can remember that when that Bonanza finally landed out of his 27-mile final and got out of the way, and then you could finally take off. In my mind, I still see, as you went by, on that first pass because we were down about mid-runway on the side of the runway. And just seeing your face as you went by, instantly I knew it was okay. Everything was good.
It's probably smiling.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. It was a cool moment for sure. As hot as it was.
So what were you feeling before you, like, how were you feeling? You got in there, you get, Dad puts the canopy on there, you're locked in, and you get down, you're about to take off. Like, what's running through your mind? I mean, are you excited? Or are you mentally crapping your pants? Like, what was going through your head?
No, I was so calm that I could have fallen asleep, but I was excited to learn how before I flew the R2, you look at the airplane, you think about the aerodynamics, and you test fly the thing in your head, the computer between your ears. And I did that with the Z-Mul, and I had a lot of experience in the R2. And I thought it was going to be a really cool airplane. Had the same horsepower, was 300 pounds lighter, and that nice fat airfoil on it. And as soon as I opened the throttle, I knew that it was just going to be a spectacular flight, and it was hard to stop. Because when you're doing the test flight, you're supposed to go out and do a test flight and then come back, and the mechanics check stuff, and I just couldn't stop, and I took off.
I remember you landed and you came back, and I think you were trying to tell me the oil temperature was high, but I didn't know what you were saying, and I just waved to you, and around you went, and zoop, back out again. Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah, that headset I had couldn't really hear anything or talk, so I thought, man, we'll just go fly the airplane. It's still working.
Right.
It's really fun to fly.
And then we had it was a little bit, I think, left wing heavy, one way or the other, and then we came back and we made an adjustment and made it exactly that amount wing heavy in the other direction, and then came back and made another tweak. So, really it was pretty close to being in rig, straight away. It was just half a turn off on the wire. Pretty close. But
yeah, I really didn't care how it's rigged. You got that stick in there to fix whatever's going on. You only need it rigged if you're sitting there with your arms crossed. And in the R2, if you're sitting there with your arms crossed, you're going to die in about 30 seconds.
Wow. Yeah.
Wow.
So
the R2 was actually divergent, and you take your feet off the rudder pedals, and it would start this oscillation in yaw, back and forth, and it would accelerate too, in amplitude, and about 5 oscillations, and it would knock you out. It was brutal, like being hit with a baseball bat. So it's like riding a bike. You learn how to keep your feet going, and you just keep it straight all the time.
Yeah.
Going cross country, you didn't think about it. But a couple of times I remember, this isn't that bad. Take your feet off for just a microsecond, and it just starts beating you to death.
Wow.
So it was divergent in yaw, but Delmar didn't care.
But
that's what the pilot.
But you didn't feel any of that in the Z, then? You didn't have that, or did you try it?
There's none of that in the Z. Z was stable as a Satavria.
Wow.
I remember your comment of stalling
and was that
it,
just
saying
because of
because we were all, remember before you flew it, we're all taking bets on what the stall speed's going to be, and we were all pretty shocked that it was, the indicated stall speed was lower than what any one of us had guessed. And then, but you mentioned that it was just kind of hanging there, and then the headrest hits you in the back of the head, and you're looking at the center of the earth.
Yeah, all the GBs were kind of that way. You're doing the stall testing, and it's like you drove off of a cliff. Boom! Like you drove your car off of a cliff.
Yeah. And then
and with all of this stuff, like Delmar, you're saying with the Z, like, pretty much all of it was kind of on the dot. Dad, for you, was that just, I don't know, shot in the dark? Like, hey, okay, yeah, we did. Or, like, what did you do to get it to be that close to good?
Well,
on the first flight.
We used all the information that we had available, which there wasn't a ton. There weren't any drawings to speak of, but we had a lot of engineering documentation that was, and some papers that were presented to SAE and some other organizations, and some articles that had some technical data. So, and we knew enough about the airfoil because it's on some of the early pit specials on Great Lakes and a lot of different airplanes. We knew exactly how that how the airplane should balance on that airfoil. So we knew a lot of that. We had the benefit of Delmar flying his airplane and having, kind of a more extreme condition than what we were going to have with this one. So that was good. So pretty much just use standard, aircraft layout and design and balance techniques to make sure it was where it ought to be. And then we put good brakes on it. We put a World War II vintage engine and propeller on it for reliability. And we just made sure that the weight and balance was good. Structurally, everything was what it was supposed to be. And then, there you go. We, one of our goals was to really find out what the airplane flew like in the configuration aerodynamically of what the Granville brothers built. We didn't want to build a home built that kind of was, resembled the shape of a GB, put a GB paint job on it and say, hey, look what we did. Because, that would be finding out something different. That would be finding out what that new design was like, not what this particular design was like. So that's really what we did. We just kind of paid attention to things to use the...
And I'd say the biggest thing on the stability, the CG was pretty far forward in the Z model, and it was aft. It was like 26% in the R2 the first time I flew it. That's dangerous. And the R2 was the Z model was maybe a little too far forward, but it made it really stable. Coming down just before you touch down, slowing down, you ran out of elevator on the Z model, so it was a far forward CG.
Yep.
The opposite of the R2, which made the R2 unstable and the Z stable.
And that's something that, with subsequent flights, we could have moved some things around and kind of got the CG to the sweet spot. It definitely was, on the conservative side for sure, being forward.
My first flight in the R2 was divergent in yaw, and I discovered that before I ever took off. And I got stuck in it and couldn't stop. And then it was 26% CG of the chord, so it was a really aft CG, and so it was divergent in pitch also that I had to sort out really quickly.
Yeah.
So things could have gone bad really quickly, but the Z model, everything was cool, so it was easy.
When
I
you
was a super pilot.
So you said you were running out of elevator. Were you running out of elevator when you're wheel landing or trying to 3-point?
When you're getting down really slow, you hit the stop on the elevator.
Okay.
And by really slow in a GB, we're talking like 110?
100.
100 was approach in the Z model, and I used 120 in the R2.
Okay. Slow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you're standing
100 seemed really slow.
When you're standing midfield and you see you coming in with either airplane, and the sink rate's just tremendous. You don't really get a sense of how the distance is getting less and less as you're coming towards us on the horizontal, but the vertical dimension was tremendous to watch. It just looked like it was coming out of the sky, just like a brick.
Like a brick.
Like a chrome-plated manhole cover.
Yeah.
Well, and Delmar, I don't think we ever told you this, but my mom and I were definitely didn't. But my mom and I were at Costco one day. Don't worry, this will wrap back around. And I was hanging out in the book section, waiting for her to stop shopping. So I had a couple hours, and I was going through books, and I saw the R2 on the cover of this book, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!" And I ran over, and the book was called, what was it, Dad? It was called like the worst
airplanes in the world.
The worst airplane designs in history. Like yeah, like worst, and it had the R2, and then in big letters it said "sewer pipe with wings," and that was like the main cover, and we got it, and it was on our coffee table for like 10 or so years. I think it finally fell apart, but I was like, oh, we got to get this for Dad. This is just so funny. It's like worst airplane designs in history or something like that, because it was never supposed to fly, or I forget the justification they had for it.
That's a lot of those rumors that went around after the bad luck. So
I figured it was because of the fuselage so fat.
Yeah, I mean it's just an odd looking airplane, but they're there are much weirder airplanes out there, weirder looking airplanes that have flown as well. So it's like,
Yeah,
Yeah, they
that's
got a
true.
book full of
right,
them.
right. So yeah, any other little things you want to add, Delmar? What are you doing now? What keeps you guys busy and going on now?
Well, I built a really cool house that I've been working on for like 10 years,
So
but we're just getting it finished
so you
up.
can work on a house for 10 years, but not a GB.
As a, yeah, not a GB.
Well, you don't have a choice when you got to finish your house because you're walking around in it every
Yeah.
day. One thing you don't want to do is move into your house before it's finished because it's really hard. You can't go cutting up lumber in the corner when you're cooking dinner in the other end.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I guess you also don't want to fly a GB before it's finished either. Have a good
No,
rule of thumb.
So are you guys
yeah, we actually did
you're
fly.
back in Montana? Is that where you're at or no? Oh,
Yes,
cool.
yes, we moved off the peninsula and we're back in Montana.
Okay.
You know the people on the Yellowstone Ranch in Montana?
No,
No, I'm sorry, that was a joke. What's that show called?
Yellowstone.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yellowstone. Duh. Yeah.
TV series she's talking about. Well, kids, are there any other questions you have or things you want to talk about before we wrap up for the night?
When you had to fly across country in the GBs, what'd you do if you had to go to the bathroom? And if you
uh,
wanted snacks? Snacks and bathroom breaks.
well, the Jeep is kind of unstable, so you weren't messing around with your John or anything. So you just held it, and my bladder would get big as a football. And I remember stopping in um, North Dakota. I You're flying high, and it's worse when you're cold, and your bladder's
Uh,
so big and hard. And I flew someplace in North Dakota. I stopped and slid to a stop and climbed out of the GB without shutting it off and pissed for 20 minutes, it seemed like. And most every stop is you pull into the gas pumps and you get up, climb out that door, and head for the bathroom. And for food, I carried a big gulp Pepsi, like a 7-Eleven big gulp, and it set on the like a Homer Simpson on the door frame. You could set it there and it would stay right there.
I was gonna ask, I was like,
So
you
I
got any cup holders on that thing, or?
didn't need a cup holder. You could set it on the door jamb there and it would stay there.
Wow.
Except I remember one time I was returning to Steve Wolf's place and I did a roll for him. Well, after I was flying across country, I had all my baggage in there and my Pepsi, and I'm driving up there and um, Yeager, Chuck Yeager's kid was a friend of Steve Wolf's there, and he said, Delmar's pissing his pants because this Pepsi was running out because I did a roll. I forgot about my Pepsi, and it was running out the door frame and down the belly.
Oh man.
So that would be my first concern when any cross country flight. Like, where are the snacks and how long do I have to hold it to go to the bathroom?
It's
Well,
usually
my
how
first
long you're.
concern was that I got GPS back then, and it was pretty cool. But I remember taking off and coming back from an air show in Alaska. I stopped in Northway, Alaska to get gas, and this big cloud rolled over me. It was a forest fire. It was the chicken forest fire. And I was stuck there for 6 days. And every day I'd take off, and you lose visibility as soon as you got very high. So I tried it every day for 6 years, and or six days. It seemed like 6 years. And on the sixth day, I popped out through the top of the smoke, and then everything was white. And I was committed because I couldn't. I was blind looking down. It was like being in a snowstorm or on top of a snowstorm. And so I dialed in Whitehorse in the GPS, and it was 300 miles, and that's about as far as you want to go in the GB on the fuel. And I got about halfway across there, and the smoke got higher and higher, and I was above 18,000 feet, and no horsepower, no wing area. I'm just dragging through the air, and the GPS clicked off, and it never came back. And I was on this sea of white, so I put a dot on my canopy and kept the sun there in that dot, and I flew out the 300 miles, what I thought the time passed, and 5 miles out of Whitehorse, boom! The smoke cleared and I saw it. So that was certain death. If I got off course, there's nothing there for hundreds of miles. If I hadn't been on course and it hadn't cleared up, I would have died that day, and the bears would have eaten me, what was left.
Yeah,
So
sometimes it just works.
kind of how the cross country trips were in the GB.
So not exactly a relaxing vacation. Definitely stressful
No,
job.
no, he didn't relax. Never relaxed in the GB.
But I remember just one more real quickie was that you came to Sun and Fun one year, I don't know if it was the second or third year, and and you had cracked the big gas tank, and then so you went somewhere along the route, and then you started using a small tank and made a bunch of stops, and then you and I pulled the tank out one day, brought it up to our shop, and we fixed it, brought it back down there, and put it back together.
Yeah, I
I don't
remember that
remember.
flight distinctly because I flew into Pine Bluff, Arkansas, and I went 500 miles on that leg. It's the longest leg that I've ever gone, and it got dark on me, and I had no lights. I had no navigation lights. I had no cockpit lights, except my GPS had a light in it. So I'd push the light to see where I'm going, and then I'd lose my night vision, and then it'd take quite a while before your night vision would come back, so you could see where you're going. And I downwind at Pine Bluff. I remember I pulled back it's the only time I flew it at night, really. So I pulled back the power, and flames come out of the pipes that I never saw before, like 2 feet. And I thought that was so cool. And so I kept doing it a lot as I was going downwind and on approach.
Let's
And
do
then
that
I
again.
landed and I pulled up to the pumps, and I getting out of the belts and everything, and I stepped out, splish splash, into gasoline. And I was sitting in a puddle of gasoline about the size of the airplane, like 20 foot in diameter, and that had just run out of that big tank. So I'm not sure why those 2 foot flames didn't ignite that fuel, but they didn't. And then I made that leg 500 miles, and then I made 5 stops to go from Pine Bluff to Sun and Fun. I think 5 stops because I only had that little 25 gallon fuel tank. So, and the thing full power burns 60 gallons an hour, so I got to be kind of careful. And I remember going into one of those places, maybe Mississippi, I'd gotten to, and I was looking at my GPS and figuring out I was only going like 170 miles, and I was thinking I can make it to the next airport. And there was a 210 on final in front of me, and he ran out of gas and landed like 2 miles from the runway. And so I'm thinking, let's see, no, we better land now. So he might have saved my life by running out of gas, because I probably would have done the same thing, trying to stretch my legs.
How long between fill-ups did you do in the Z normally? Like what kind of time?
About 3 hours is what I planned.
Okay.
And but you get up high and get good tailwinds, then there's usually go 300 miles is what I planned, but keep it to 3 hours, whatever.
Yeah.
But there's a few times I would always run that big tank empty and then go back to the 25-gallon tank for when I'm landing. But I remember going into Cleveland, Ohio, and I forgot to switch back, and I was down maybe getting close to the Cleveland airport, and the engine quit. And I was down in the treetops. It seemed like 20 minutes to get It's like you're swimming in glue. First, you got to figure out what happened. You forgot to switch it to the next tank, and you got to get the pumps going because it's got no fuel and just the propeller turning it, and you're slowing down over the treetops. Get your adrenaline going, and remind you not to do that again.
Well, and I think one thing we learned today was that GBs are for speed, not comfort, when it comes to flight. They're there for racing in the 30s, not for skipping around the states in the 2000s.
Yeah, if you want comfort, you buy a Cessna or a jet top or something.
So you did 1,500 hours on the same engine, or did you have to do another engine?
Overhauled the engine at about 700, I think, 700 or 750. And when they overhauled it, I guess the crankshaft in a 985 is two parts bolted together. And it appears that they just weren't bolted together perfectly, and that engine shook after I overhauled it. But it was terrifying. I never wore a parachute before that, but it shook a little bit, and that wears on your mind after sitting in there. I started wearing a parachute because I thought the thing was going to come apart any minute, but I had 20 air shows booked, so I had to keep flying it. And then I took it down to and got it. They went through it again, and they got rid of that shake. It was just how they put those two pieces of the crankshaft together, which is kind of disconcerting. I like that engine. I like to not know anything that's going on inside of that engine. You just trust it, blind trust, and you don't think about all those parts moving inside of it.
Yeah, definitely.
But that's hard to do after you're thinking about every part inside of it after when it's shaking. You're trying to figure out what's going wrong every minute.
All right. Well, Kate, is that a good time to wrap it up and call it a night?
Yeah. Oh, featuring Roscoe. Did you hear that?
Yeah.
I will be keeping that in the episode. Roscoe seems to be tired.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for chatting with us, Delmar. I didn't realize how truly horrible flying a GB sounds. I mean, it sounds fun, but just in terms of, yeah, no. So that was
It, it
interesting
was
to
a,
learn.
it was a whole different environment that I got used to all that. And I remember I'd land in Shelby, and I had my Corvette in the hangar, and I'd trade out the GB and get in the Corvette and driving home at night, and I'd look down, I'm going 120 because that's as slow as you want to go on the GB, and that's what felt comfortable. And actually,
Whoops.
during those years in Montana, we didn't have a speed limit, so it was like heaven driving around in a Corvette. Set the cruise control on 113. It was very relaxing.
Well, thanks so much for chatting with us and being more of a cautionary tale in terms of flying GBs than, it was amazing, but there was a lot of, a lot of not so comfortable things that you had to do for it. Well, hopefully we can have you on here again because, you've flown so many amazing things and we'd love to chat with you again.
Okay, appreciate you having me on.
Yeah.
Yep.
See you later.
All right. Take care.
Thanks, everybody. And we hope you
Thank
guys
you.
have a great night.
Okay, thanks a lot. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.